Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with our lunch and learn. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Nicole Campbell, and I am the Chief Impact Officer here at Smart Start. And we're so excited to have you all join us today on our conversation about parents under pressure in our partnership with LUMO. And we will learn more about LUMO as our participants introduce themselves. But our topic today, parents across all backgrounds want to provide their children with a foundation for happiness and success. Yet too many fear they won't be able to provide what's necessary for their children or access what they need in order to lead a fulfilling life. These needs are many and they vary from safe neighborhoods to admissions to the right schools to stable housing. Um, the parents feel that they are falling short of meeting their children's needs, and the more they need to feel like they have to scramble to gain lost ground. With intensifying culture of comparison, often propagated by influencers and online trends, and unrealistic expectations around milestones and parenting strategies, achievements, and status symbols that kids and parents must pursue. Chasing these unreasonable expectations have left many families feeling exhausted, burnt out, and perpetually behind. Average employment work hours have increased over time for mothers and fathers. Balancing work commitments and occupational related stress with family responsibilities can lead to work and family conflict, guilt, and again, burnout. Financial stress is a major challenge for parents and caregivers, weighing in at 66% of financial stress for parents and caregivers versus 39% of that stress for other adults. Societal isolation and lack of social support can lead to this heightened stress. 65% of parents and guardians that are in a couple, and 77% of single parents experience loneliness and isolation, compared to only 55% of non-parents. This is a large conversation that we want to tackle today, but I feel like we have the right crew to do it. At this time, we are going to have the introductions of our panelists. We will start with Elena Bridgman, one of our partners from LUMO. So Elena, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Nicole. Thank you so much for to Smart Start for the partnership and the panel. And I am excited to be here today. Again, my name is Elena Areco Bridgman. I'm the co-founder and COO for Lumo. And this advisory coming out in August, I have to tell you, myself and my co-founder and all of the other founding members of Lumo, we were basically saying, it's about time. This is what we've been banging our heads against the wall saying we've got to support parents. And we believe that through our work as executive coaches and leadership trainers, we're doing that at the individual level. And when companies get behind supporting their working parents, it's not just good for business, it's really good for everyone, and everyone gets to thrive. So I'm super excited about this conversation, Nicole, and I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, and at this time, we would like to have Miriam, can you introduce yourself and tell us why is this topic important for you in your work?
Yes, and thank you, Nicole. I'm very grateful to be here and be here with everybody. So I'm Miriam Espaillat, and I am the co-founder of Rate Hospitality, which is a restaurant group. My active role is community engagement, which what I do is really work with employees to connect them to different resources, whether it is housing, childcare, just figuring out things that come up for them. This topic is important. One, I'm a parent myself, and I've been through the challenges of raising children and working at the same time. But also being in the restaurant industry, I do realize that one is non-traditional hours, right? So childcare works differently for parents that work for me. And just sometimes the income is not as high. It's just changes a lot of things. So we've gotten creative on how to work with our parents, work with the hours, and be flexible where we can. So I'm just very excited to share and also learn from everybody else here. Thank you.
Awesome. And we're happy to have you, Miriam. Thank you, because you are bringing a different perspective to this conversation for a very important population of our communities. Morgan, if we could hear from you and why this conversation is important for you.
Thank you, Dr. Nicole. Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan Fay. I'm a managing director with Blackbird Partners. We're a legal consulting and recruiting company. I'm also a lawyer, and I'm a mom of two young boys, 8 and 5, and my younger son, who's 5, has some additional needs as well. So for me personally, I just think, to your point, Elena, when this report came out, there was so much conversations on a variety of my mom threads and a lot of like, yeah, finally, and obviously. And so I'm just absolutely thrilled to be part of a conversation where we can start to identify this struggle and talk about, in addition to potential solutions. I think there's so much power in all of us recognizing that we're all struggling together to combat the isolation and the shame and the additional stress that I think a lot of us as parents put on ourselves. And so I think that's a huge part of just all of us saying, no one here is alone. We're all doing our best. And also, to Miriam's point, I'm really excited to learn about successes other people have had in their personal and professional experiences. I can talk a little bit about the legal industry from my perspective, but I just think it's such a larger issue to have such a diversity of panelists and thoughts and experiences to come together to just all say, we're in this together, let's figure it out, is just such a wonderful topic to have put together. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you, Morgan. And next we'll have Dr. Devanya. Dr. Devanya Govan Hunt. We're excited to have you here today. She actually, well, I'll go ahead and let you. So
awesome.
wonderful.
Thank you, Dr. Nicole, and thanks to Smart Start and your team for pulling this amazing opportunity together to talk about something that our organization absolutely loves to engage in conversation about. I have the honor and the privilege of leading the Black Child Development Institute Carolinas, and one of the buckets of work that we operate in here in Mecklenburg and surrounding counties actually focuses on parent and community engagement. We realize that there's a default paradigm, like parent involvement paradigm, that we need to help shift in terms of why, how, and what encourages parents to show up for their children, especially when we're talking about school-age children. And there's very little conversation around how we massage systems to do something different in order to support parents and meeting them exactly where they are so that they are able to show up in the way that they want to show up for their children. And, in preschool, in early care and education, in school and beyond. So we're absolutely thrilled to be a part of this conversation and maybe encourage others to think about how we massage the system as a whole to be better for our families so that our families can be better for our children, thus resulting in much stronger communities.
And actually, as a shout out to you, Dr. Devanya, and your team over at the Black Child Development Institute, you all have been certified as a family forward organization. Also, Smart Start has as well, but that shows that you guys walk your talk, that you all have been identified as family forward. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Kelly Little, Mr. Kelly Little.
Blessings. This topic is extremely important to me. One, I work and operate in a space where I'm educating fathers on how to navigate systems, infrastructures, and provide support. But in the meantime, hence in the name Urban Institute for Strengthening Families, my priority is those fathers, the children, and the moms, because happy mom, happy dad leads to kids who function in the fullest and most complete capacity. That's their God-given birthright. So from that space, it's extremely critical. And what we know is that the empirical data and the research says that when we can help parents be supported and not be overwhelmed, not be inundated with the traditional processes that happen right here, where we don't prioritize our mental health, our physical health, then what we do is we pass those generational traumas down to our children, and it has a multi-generational impact. So to be in a space where we can look through a lens, actually through multiple lenses, to see how we best serve our children collectively and best support parents collectively, because healing happens in community, and that's what we're doing right now.
And Kelly, we're excited for you. Didn't you just win an award this weekend?
You had to throw me out there. Yeah, I just got the spirituality award at the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville, Kentucky. So thank you, Nicole.
Congratulations to you. We're so happy to have you in our presence today. And now we have David, and we're excited to have you, David. You're coming to us from Johns Hopkins. And so we're excited to hear what you think about our topic today, David.
Thanks so much, Nicole, and thank you to Smart Start and LUMO for hosting this a really critical and important question and conversation we're having today. David Smith, I'm a professor at Johns Hopkins in the Carey Business School. I'm a sociologist. I do all of my research in the area of we call the intersection of gender, work, and family, and I've done a lot of research around dual career families and military families. And most recently, my research over the last decade or more has focused on allyship with my co-author, Brad Johnson. And we've published two books, Athena Rising and Good Guys. And again, our focus has been on how do we engage more men in becoming better allies, mentors, and sponsors and showing up. And that includes in the home as well. And I think today for organizations and for leaders and men specifically, we've got to show up and begin to own, our portion of this, because there is a caregiving crisis in our country. And I think that is one of the reasons why we're here today talking about this, why the Surgeon General is talking about it in this same language. And we've got to begin thinking about really large scale systemic solutions and how each of us can take a piece and a part of that and looking at what's working. And that's the topic of our new book that'll be coming out here next year, and really focusing on what are the structural changes that we can be making. Again, I think we've focused for a long time on what we can individually, each of us do to create and make our own situation better and maybe even help a few of our people. But how do we change the systems to make it work for everybody in a much more equitable sense? And so thank you again for having me.
Thank you. And Sheila, our final panelist today. Sheila, would you like to introduce yourself to our group and why you think this topic is important for you?
Sure. Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm Sheila Sokolsky, and I think of all the different hats I wear as to why this topic is important to me. So first, I'm a mother of two daughters, 8 and 10. Second, I'm an employee of a company that has programs to help support me. Third, I'm a leader of people at a company who need support. And finally, I'm an innovator. I have the benefit of working for a company where I can help develop new products and programs that can support working families, can support employees through benefits that their employers can provide. So one of the things I've been lucky to be able to work on is a product called Family Leave Insurance, which actually supports families in states that don't have mandated paid family medical leave programs to help employers bring some more flexibility and leave to employees who need it in different ways. So I also just really am passionate about this. My company is very passionate about expanding paid leave. And I think it's only one of the ways that we can support parents in this journey. But it's a very important way, whether it's care of a family member or, welcoming someone into their family. There's just a lot of ways that we can do that. So I'm excited for everybody on this panel because all of the different perspectives coming together are going to be really exciting for me. So thank you for having me.
Yes, and Sheila and David, I think that having you all on the panel as national folks actually also helps us bring perspective of things that could be on the horizon nationally, even outside of here in North Carolina, Mecklenburg County. And we're so excited about anyone who is outside of North Carolina that's joining our Lunch and Learn today. So our first question is, the Surgeon General has typically highlighted other health issues in past advisories like smoking cessation and other lifestyle habits and other health issues. In your experience, why would you think that he has chosen to highlight the impacts of parenting under pressure? What are some of the challenges that you have seen parents experience that would warrant this being a Surgeon General's warning? We'll start with Elena.
Thank you, Dr. Nicole. Yeah, this conversation, it impacts all of us every day. So why is he focusing on it? I think the primary reason is because of mental health and the impact on mental health of working parents and the impact that mental health has in the workplace and in on families and in societies. It can no longer be ignored. So when a company or even our government is not paying attention to the mental health of our working parents, then there could be impacts on higher healthcare costs. There could be societal impacts and developmental impacts for our children in the communities. It just is too big of an issue for us to avoid looking at it any longer. And Nicole, you and I had an opportunity last week to hear all about the challenges of healthcare in our community here in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and the underlying theme we heard in every single conversation, no matter what we were talking about, was mental health being so important and so critical to and the mental health of all of our community being so important and critical to every aspect of healthcare, from what we're paying for it to making sure that there's health equity to ensuring that there's enough healthcare for everyone in the community. So it can't be ignored, in my opinion. And the last thing I'll just note is that we know that we've seen higher levels of folks within companies taking mental health breaks or leaves of absence. And so this is just another reason why we need to make sure we're paying attention to it.
Thank you. Anybody else on the panel want to address that question? David, and then Miriam.
Yeah, I think this points to, again, the large scale issue, as I was mentioning in my introduction, about there is a caregiving crisis going on in this country. Everything from a lack of access, and especially equitable access, as you think about different groups who have the ability to access that in different areas of the country, to the cost, right? And cost is part of that as well. And it's just, I mean, to the point where parents are having to make really hard choices about how they want to parent. And you know, in the child care part of it is just one piece of it, right? We really need to be looking at this from a broader perspective around just caregiving in general. And so again, it is at a crisis situation. The pandemic, I think, in many ways highlighted and really shown a really bright light on something that has been going on, the gaps we've had in our care system around the United States, if you want to call it a system. It's hard to call it that sometimes, but now we have to do something about it. And the impact that it's having in the workplace, you know, Elena just talked about a number of those. And I think what's really interesting is often people make, again, assumptions around parenting and childcare, to Kelly's point earlier, that, you know, these are things that women only deal with, and it's not. Today's expectations are that men and fathers in their roles are caregivers too, and we see that in the research now too, which I think is really, really interesting. A number of research studies that are coming out, where in one that we were involved with just 2 years ago with the Kellogg Foundation, pointed to the number one stressor and the number one cause for burnout for men in the workplace was work-life integration. And I think that's just striking to hear that in this day and age, but it just points to the fact that, again, things have moved and changed in attitudes in the families and expectations around who's doing what and what it looks like to combine caregiving and parenting in paid work. And often I think in the ways that women have experienced it for so long, and the inability to find a workplace that appreciates and values what your role is outside of paid work, men are experiencing it now too. And there's expectations, and what it leads to, this conflict that they're feeling in the workplace, it leads to stress, and it leads to burnout. It leads to mental health problems. It leads to relationship satisfaction decreases, and to marital satisfaction decreases, all of these things, which makes it, again, a very systemic problem. And I think one of the reasons why the Surgeon General was really, really smart to raise it to this level of concern.
If you're
Oh, sorry, Miriam, and then Dr. Govan Hunt.
All right, well, thank you. You know, this topic, the more I think about it, I am extremely passionate about it, especially now, you know, hearing you all more and hearing, you know, this concept of the two-generational approach, right? So a lot of times we focus on the children, how children during the school, and obviously extremely important, and we need to focus on that. But a lot of times we leave out the parents, right? We feel this compassion towards the kids, And again, the biggest change we could do is when there's a child and you start working, that preventive, that early prevention is huge. But when you think about parents are the ones raising these kids. So if all the symptoms are showing up in the parents from a family systems theory, Bowen's systems theory specifically, the kids a lot of times are just playing over and over what they're seeing their parents do. And then it becomes a generational concern. And then we have just multiple generations of children who are now, in this constant either hypervigilance or this constant anxiety, all these fears, right, that they're learning from the parents. So I think it is critical for us, me, I'm an employer, I'm working with the parents, and if there's concerns that come up at work and we are able to accommodate whatever it is, whether it's changing the time they come into work or whether it's if there's flexibility. Again, I'm in the restaurant industry. It's not 9 to 5, it could be till way later and the weekends. And just how can we have that view of, this is a great employee, and we know that we get greater outcomes as far as performance when a person is not under stress, when they're not worried about their children not getting picked up from the bus or getting to school on time. So just being open as an employer or whatever industry we're in to hear out what's going on, what are the barriers that parents are having, but definitely, the impacts of mental health are huge. And we just see the cycle play over and over again when we don't stop and look at it from the root, which is really working with the parents to not, take away whatever barriers or at least help, reduce the barriers for the parents so that like that children can also be more successful.
And Miriam, you bring up some really great points. And one of the highlights that I meant to give for you when you gave your introduction is that you have a background in social work and you bring that to your work and how you support your employees and all your team members and your business, and that you show that compassion and you have those conversations about how to be flexible. And I think that you are an example of what other people should try to be able to implement, even if it did take implementing having a social work focused on their team for HR to be able to support those type of efforts. So I definitely wanted to give kudos to you and that perspective that you bring to your work and that level of compassion and care that also creates economic mobility because people stay employed. So we applaud you and thank you for that. Dr. Govan Hunt and then Kelly Little.
Thank you. I'm going to try to keep it as concise as I possibly can. I get so excited when I hear the right things, what we think of the right things being actually put out into the universe. And so with the Surgeon General actually naming this as an issue, it actually forces us to look at the systemic approach. So I appreciate David mentioning systems, and we have to look beyond some of the issues of power and cultural and racialized assumptions when we're talking about children. Miriam pointed out that sometimes we have a tendency, not sometimes, most of the time we have a tendency when we're talking about children to just focus on the child, forgetting that that child is an extension of a family, an extension of a pair of parents, an extension of a community. And so it gives us, makes it really easy for us to kind of try to compartmentalize things, whether we're talking about literacy, if we're talking about mental health by itself, if we're talking about food insecurities, we forget to look at the whole child, taking a whole child perspective, forgetting to look at a community approach. The Surgeon General naming this forces us to take in a perspective that this is a village thing. In order for us to develop whole, healthy children, we have to remember that they are extensions of their families, that their families are extensions of their community. We have to look at systemic changes. What policies can we put in place to encourage the development of whole, healthy children? We can't just wait until they get into the school system and say, well, let's just focus on their reading skills. We have to take things from a root cause perspective. And most of the time, families from communities of color, a lot of these things were exacerbated, right, by COVID school closures, by COVID-19, by the pandemic, things that these families have been asking for decades, plus decades. Our children should not have to be resilient, Dr. Nicole. They shouldn't have to show up being resilient. We should have a choice. They should have an option, right? And a part of that is taking heed to what was published in this report and naming the fact that there are systemic issues that we are dealing with that prevent our children from showing up in a whole healthy fashion that comes from whatever it is that their parents are dealing with. So there are things that we can do in the workplace. There are policies we can put in place. There's conversations, hard conversations that we can have in order to lift this up for our families.
And you're absolutely right. In the report, it states that stressors disproportionately burden parents and caregivers with fewer resources. A review of 108 studies found a significant association between food insecurity and symptoms of parental depression, anxiety, and stress, which thereby creates a higher case for the ACEs in their children. So it does impact in a very vicarious way. Kelly and then Sheila.
Look, I don't know what else to say after they eloquently shared so many powerful things. But as Dr. Devine was just talking about this conversation around resilience, I have this quote that says, resilience without recharge is death while living. So if we take a second and reflect on if we continue to keep going, one, we're modeling that behavior to our children, which means that's what they're going to pick up. And then they're going to pass that down to their children. So first, we have to do a self-audit because, again, 2019 showed that if it didn't show us anything, it showed us that we have to take off the mask and we have to prioritize our own self-care and our own health so that we can ensure that our children are healthy and whole. And for organizations, we were challenged to work differently, some more hybrid schedules, a lot of working from home. All those things allowed us to shift our priorities. And in that, we learned to move and we learned to count on people differently. We spoke to people differently. And so those are some of the things that we can implement as we talk about some of the challenges that we face. One is we need to make sure that we are not only working with people, but we are working with them in a way that we are supporting one another. Because the most important thing that we can do is like see people. And we often say we see people, but we don't really see them. And I say that from the perspective of if I speak to Morgan and she asks her how she's doing and she says she's doing well, and I can see in her face that she's having a very difficult day. Her body posture is telling me something completely different. However, I'm so focused on the systemic process of the day-to-day minutia that we go through, then shame on me as a leader, shame on me as a father, shame on me as a human being who's always concerned about the elevation of the human condition. And if I'm not putting myself in a position to be able to model what our children should be modeling, then there are some things I have to do with myself. And so I think the Surgeon General prioritizing this conversation is extremely important because, again, although there are individual things systemically, we got to move away from the symptomology of what's the barrier. It's a man-made barrier. And we have the choice to prioritize wellness, health, parenting, parenthood, motherhood, fatherhood, neighborhood.
Thank you, Kelly. Sheila and then Morgan.
Thank you. So when I think about the Surgeon General statement, I think it's really a call to action for everyone, right? So there's legislation is about, there's employers that need to take a better action. All of us in whatever role we're sitting in have a part of that. And going back to what David said, I think part of that is still stigma around fathers as well. So in my role, we administer many paid leave programs and unpaid leave programs for employers all over the country, and including the mandated programs in some states. And what we find is that typically men, even when they have leave available as parental leave or caregiver leave, they are still taking it much less often than their female counterparts. And we do believe that part of that really is the stigma of them feeling that they can take that time and use that time to take on that role because of what they feel it may do for them in the workplace and their career, etc., even when it's available. So typically when we have our employee surveys, we're always asking about, what's preventing people from bringing their best selves to work. And consistently, 69% of my personal team are caregivers of some type. We keep track of that type of metric. And again and again in the comments, I see it's juggling work-life balance. And my company is one that I'm so proud of. Every employee gets 16 weeks of paid family or caregiving leave, fully paid, and we have flexible and remote and hybrid options. And still, with all of those programs available, parents and caregivers are still disproportionately saying the biggest thing is trying to balance that work life. So we obviously need to be doing more as a culture to really support that. Even when we do have the programs in place, we still need to make sure people feel that they can take advantage of them and still participate actively in the workplace.
Morgan?
I was going to echo just a couple of things and then connect the dots on some. And then I'm sure there's other questions too, Dr. Nicole, we wanted to talk about. But I think the big part about the Surgeon General coming out and identifying this, it's been said, is that it's systemic and it's not individual. And you think about some of the other warnings that have taken place in the past, smoking, gun violence, AIDS, other things. It is not, hey, individuals who smoke, stop smoking, and then everything will be fine. There are so many other components, like we talked about, the systems that need to be part of this solution. And I think that is one of the more powerful aspects of this becoming part of the conversation, because I think a lot of us parents feel these pressures, but individualize them, which gets to that guilt and that shame that we talked about earlier. Like, if I could just work harder, Sheila, what you said, if I could just find that work-life balance, if me, and it's not me, it's not I, it's us, it's all of us together. And what Kelly said about healing happening in communities, that is crucial. And then the other thing I just was going to add to that, Sheila, about what you said in terms of parental leave and what David and Kelly said about fathers also being empowered to be part of the solution. I think in some ways that step one sort of on that parenting journey of parental leave, not only is the cultural aspects not supporting and encouraging men in a lot of industries to take that leave if it's available, but that first step, or one of the first steps, is that default paradigm that Dr. Govan Hunt talked about, where the moms are in charge of raising these children and they will be the first people, and you can take the time, and that's it. And so that just gets back to some of the modeling, and I think, again, goes into just how many different components in our systems and in our culture are at play here. And so it adds to the complexity of it, but I think it then adds to the opportunities for solutions and improvements, because there's no shortage of places we can look to that need to be fixed in all of these systems. So just to reiterate some of the wonderful things that have been said so far, I think it's so powerful to hear so many different people saying the same things in different ways with the same and different perspectives.
Thank you, Morgan. And so while parents and caregivers may have the primary responsibility for raising children, they shouldn't have to do it entirely on their own. Raising healthy children benefits all of society. What are or could be some societal supports through policy or programs that could support parents? I know one in particular. I'm not going to call you out, Dr. Govan Hunt, but I know your family empowerment program was a big one that I saw for myself in terms of helping parents who sometimes feel very isolated to create a small village for themselves, which they have peers that they can connect with and lean on in any time, to be able to give them some level of support. Programs like that, even though the program is over, I know for a fact that some of those families still connect. They still have dinners together. They were strangers before that program started, and you all had a funded program that was able to help them connect. Can you talk a little bit about programs like family empowerment?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Nicole. And it is our family empowerment program is one that creates space and opportunity for families to build villages, to make connections with other people, not just right there in their own tiny community, but maybe in other parts of the county. One of the things that I'm particularly proud of about that program is that we have some participants, and yes, they do still come together, that are actually allowed time off from work in order to participate in that type of program. So when they approach their supervisors and their policies in place at their individual workplaces that actually grant them space, an opportunity to participate, and says, hey, I really need to take advantage of this program because of whatever reason. There's not a fault finding conversation that happens. It doesn't start with fault finding. That workplace is open, it's inviting for that employee to come and sit down with his or her supervisor to engage in that conversation. And they're allowed to take time, paid time, to go and find resources and take advantage of resources that are going to help them become more whole individuals, healthy individuals, to make sure that they feel supported because their supervisors understand that if they feel whole and healthy and supported, that their work product is so much better, that they can show up with peace of mind, knowing that they have a village to support them. So we do think that allowing spaces, companies having policies in place to support parents to take advantage of those types of opportunities is a start. It is a start. And understanding that parenting is, I say it all the time, one of the most daunting things that we will ever do with our lives, yet one of the most rewarding. And no one should ever feel like they have to do it alone. So in order for us to shift the culture that we currently exist in, where it's you, it's me, it's it's hers, but it's our children, our communities, our families, unless we take steps to do that and shift mindsets, we're going to be spinning this wheel for a long time to come. And children and families are going to continue to show up unhealthy with all sorts of challenges.
Thank you. Thank you for having a program like that that's so powerful and so that will resonate for a long time. We're going to go with Kelly, then Elena.
So as Doc was just going over that amazing program, I think organizations have the capability, the ability, and really they should prioritize their focus on creating similar programs. I'm big on what we call healing circles and how, again, healing happening in community. We have the opportunity to create these circles for parents where they have the support. And let's not forget, oftentimes we specifically focus on mental health clinicians, which are important, social workers, which are important, but there are natural supports in every community, which includes the employment community. So creating those circles where people can feel like they belong, they got support, multiple perspectives, much like we're identifying right here, but then also how do we leverage them to utilize like EAP programs. Elena's sitting in here, so I'm always speak to the power of coaches and helping us to tap into our own innate power, knowing that we have support. Because individually we can fall, but if we're all operating together, creating a system to rival this other system that we're talking about, that's not looking at the needs of families and community, challenging. Now I'm in disruptive mode now, Doc. So now challenging systems and institutions to make sure we increase paid leave, flexible scheduling. Sometimes we create these barriers where people can't take advantage of opportunities because it's at a time where there's no flexibility for them. So we have to create that flexibility in those models within the organizations and systems that we work on. And that means tapping into some of these agencies to find out who could come in and help with childcare on site. All these different areas will help us to be able to better create innovative processes and opportunities for organizations to thrive, but more importantly, for families to feel like they belong, that they've seen, they're heard, thus creating something that they'll pass down to their children.
Awesome. Elena and then Morgan.
There's so much that's been said, so I'm going to try not to repeat anything. Everything is amazing. When I think about societal support, I think about us valuing parenting as being one of the highest and most amazing gifts and jobs, if you will. I hate to call it a job because it's a gift, right, that we all have. So first, we've got to acknowledge that as a society, and we've got to stop secret parenting. So I think you were talking about that earlier, David, Kelly. Especially dads, but even moms. Stop secret parenting. Let's take the stigma out of having to leave to go pick up our kid from school. And to your point, Kelly, as employers, we can be flexible with that, right? One of the ways that we can support our working parents is to train managers to know what to do and to empower them to say, instead of we all have policies, we all have human resource policies on how we work and all of the things. And as managers, we have some autonomy perhaps to make a decision to say, hey, sure, 30 minutes and that, whatever you need, like empowering our employees, our managers, our leaders to actually meet their people where they are. So Kelly, you were saying about really seeing people. One of the things we talk about as coaches is meeting people where they are. So policies are not one size fits all. Every individual's family, every individual working parent has a different need. And so if we can empower our managers to, give them the guardrails, of course, right? The 80-20 rule, here's the policy. And there's going to be times when we have to color outside the lines. But doing that will endear our employees to stay with us and make them happier, healthier, and more productive in the workplace. So those are the two things I wanted to add. And then the last thing is also looking at developing our caregivers. So we believe at LUMO, when someone becomes a working parent, it's a great unlocking of their leadership. What if we didn't look at it as being a liability, but rather an asset that someone becomes a parent? What if we invest more in our caregivers rather than less? Let's develop them even more so they can show up really fantastic at home for their people, for their children, for their families, for their communities, and at work.
Nice paradigm shift. Morgan, and then the last response on that will be Miriam, and then we'll do our last question, and then we'll open it up to questions in the chat. Go ahead, Morgan.
Elena, you got one of the things I was going to touch upon, so I'm going to elaborate a little bit with it. But I think when you say that paradigm shift of valuing parenting at the same level that we value sort of paid jobs, Kelly, I'm right there with you with being a disruptor and identifying these systems that are not working. And then I think sometimes I'm curious other people's experiences when employers push back. Like I love the opportunity of employers saying, we're going to give you that space and opportunity to go to these trainings, to have access to these resources. I worked with a client once who we started to make a list of the skills that you hone as a parent. I mean, they are limitless and they obviously overlap with your ability to be a leader, to be a manager, to just be an effective person. I'm not sure who said this before, but like that whole person, whole people create whole people. And so, Elena, I love that idea of why can't we see people becoming parents as such a value add to them as individual humans that we could all, I hate to say capitalize on, but we could all benefit from in a way that just goes back to the modeling and all of those other things that we have touched on. And it just seems like in some ways a missed opportunity. And sometimes it almost, for me personally, feels challenging to have to like make a business case for something that is just going to help us as a community and a society. But I have found when there's some hesitancy on employers' side of like, well, that's not our role. It's just another way to approach it to say, well, this is good for you as an employer, as well as all of us as humans, which can get lost somehow still, that we're all just humans trying to figure this out. So I love that, Elena. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Morgan and Miriam.
Yes, and Elena, I love what you said about the managers, because that's actually an approach that we have taken. Part of the trainings that we do with our managers is talk about equity and talk about, we do a lot of second chance employment. So we talk about what are some of the barriers some of our employees might be coming in with. And that again changes what Morgan was saying, having that human piece to it. Obviously, we don't have it perfect. We're dealing with people. We're imperfect ourselves as employer. We're learning as we're going. But the one big piece I did want to add to this is the power of social capital. Just think about the spaces that you are in, the access you have, and how you could share that information, whether you are running a nonprofit or you're in a university, whatever it is that you are, and how the information you have, how to just share it forward, or how to think, okay, now I'm sitting in this panel or wherever you are, who did I hear say something that I could eventually collaborate with or gain more perspective, and just, yes, to keep growing on our own personal careers, but also to how do we share this information, make it tangible, because it's big systemic issues that we're dealing with. They're generational. They're way bigger than us. So we also need each other to learn from each other and also share that information forward.
I love that you said that, Miriam, because that's a great transition to our last question for you all before we open it up to questions from the chat. And my question for each of you panelists is, what are some of the things that what is the way that you would encourage parents to try to gain some of control of what they can control? What is something that they can use to control their controllables? I give you an example. For me, work-life balance is really important. As I've gotten older, that's something that I've tried to hold on to. It's like I work when I'm at work, and when I leave work, I try to leave in such a way that I'm not taking anything home with me. Sorry, Mike. But I try to do that. I try to leave so that when I go home, I'm focused on home. That helps. That's a stress reliever. That's a strategy. What is something that you all could say in your own personal arsenal of success, because you all are all highly successful people, that you could recommend to a parent to be able to alleviate some of the pressure? Anybody who's ready? The first panel.
Dr. Nicole, this gonna seem like real simple, but we've seen it actually work. We've graduated a number of parents and still meet with parents on a regular basis through this family empowerment program. And believe it or not, having a conversation about how we socialize the idea of wanting support and needing support is a really big deal. So a lot of these families come to these sessions under the impression that they have no control. They come to these sessions under the impression that if they ask for help, particularly in their workplace, or they're needing extra time to raise children or to attend meetings or to do whatever it is that they need to do in order to support their family, that they'll be looked at as weak, so to speak, as inefficient, as someone who's incapable of showing up 100% for their work team. They come to our sessions feeling like they have to adopt these resolutions, that there are no solutions that they can offer. So the first thing that we do is we have a really heart-to-heart, a really transparent, honest, an authentic conversation with our families, and help them understand how much power they hold in the situation in the first place. Like, as a unit, we really can demand bigger and better and more efficient from whatever entity it is that we're in. It's going to take all of us, right? It's going to take all of us. But socializing the idea of wanting support, of needing support, that is not a fault-finding situation, and that we can actually bring solutions to the table. Show up saying, this is what I need. If you want this from me, in order for me to give you my absolute best so that it benefits all of us, I am going to need X, Y, and Z in return. And believe it or not, that has worked wonders in many different situations. And families come back feeling like, okay, I do have some power in these processes. I can help develop or design what these processes look like.
That's a powerful jewel you just dropped there. And it seemed like something should be so obvious, but it is definitely that's powerful. Elena and then Sheila.
I had the same thought, Devanya, is ask for support. And I would say I love the idea of bringing all the people together to do it and have one united voice. And I'll just bring it back to the individual for just a moment. So as parents, we need to set boundaries and advocate for ourselves like we advocate for our children. I'll say that again because we'll go through walls for our kids, right? Advocating for ourselves like we advocate for our children. And support looks like many different things to many different people, but that's one of the biggest areas where we can really make change and really find that work life. I'm going to say integration rather than balance. I don't think it'll ever be balanced, right? But if we can integrate, then we can and get supported to do so while advocating and setting those boundaries, and that might help us to move forward one step at a time.
Sheila and Kelly.
Thanks. I say two things that have worked for me because you say we're all successful, but I bet all of us at different times don't necessarily feel successful. And I think that's something to share. And so there's two ways. One, know your non-negotiables. Like my non-negotiables, like if my kid has a thing at school, it's a sports awards ceremony in the middle of the day, it's this, like I will move heaven and earth to move things around to make that happen, right? Because we will do anything for our kids. But the second piece of that is going back to, I forget the term, quiet parenting or something. I bring my authentic self to work with people who work with me, with my boss, with my peers. They know, what my priorities are. And by doing that, I'm not only helping myself, I'm helping the people around me. I'm helping change that perspective and that stigma and everything around being able to do both, and that there are trade-offs. You cannot always do it all. And encouraging people like at my company, like you can take, it was for different purposes, you can take a mental health day. We actually track, have you taken a day for yourself to do something for yourself? Not necessarily for your kids, but for yourself, right? So I think modeling the behavior actually helps us feel more empowered about doing that. And it makes others around us feel more empowered. And by changing that environment, even just a little within your own circle and moving that out, that's where we really start to influence change.
Okay, thank you, Kelly, then Morgan.
The first thing I had to ensure that I made sure I did, because I always wanted to help everybody. But it's okay to say no. Let me repeat that again. It's okay to say no. No doesn't mean forever. But in this moment, I'm overwhelmed with these priorities. When I get to a better place, if you still need that assistance, I can give you that assistance. Verbalize it. One. Number two, it's this thing I do. I tell people, take you 2 mason jars. When you walk out the confinements of your house, put your intentions for the day and your hope for the day inside that mason jar. Stay focused on your priorities, because bad planning on other people's part doesn't constitute a priority on your part. So staying true to those things that you need to do, right? And making sure you leave home at home when you can. Now, we still have a long day at work. We go through that. Maybe some frustrating things that happen. Before you cross the threshold of your house, I need you to have another mason jar and put purge on it. Purge all the things that didn't go right. Don't take it inside your house with you. You have to separate the two. And then lastly, I prioritize every day what I'm going to do. The same thing, I have a checklist for work priorities. I have to prioritize my own mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. So for me, I have to have a little bit of breathing time at certain points of the day. I might do a little 5-minute meditation. I might take a meeting on my phone on Zoom outside where I'm getting sun, where I'm out in fresh air and I can smell, so that for myself, those are the things that create peace for me. And if you put that in your schedule, 1 minute, 2 minutes throughout the day, you are prioritizing yourself and you are meeting anxiety, depression, frustration, all those things at a place where you're able to limit its impact on our body.
Really great thought. Morgan, and then David and Miriam, and then we're closing out.
Thank you so much, Kelly. That was so powerful. And it made me think too, I think a lot of us as parents want to give our children the world, right? Safety, love, compassion. And I think all of the things we want to give our children, we also need to remember to give ourselves. grace, patience, space. And so I just think I wanted to add everything that has been said today about modeling behavior to support fellow parents, I think also makes us better parents for our children. And I think it's really helpful in addition to not, I love that phrase, silent parenting, like leaving when you need to leave and putting it on your calendar. This event is happening. It's not secret. We're all doing it together. And I just think sometimes I find it helpful to again model that to my kids when I'm struggling to integrate all the things I want to accomplish today, and using that as a teachable moment also for our children to say, mom has to do this and mom has to do that, and what am I going to do first? And just giving them that example as well, that none of us are perfect. We're all doing our best. And so I just think all of the modeling we're doing for each other, I didn't want it to get lost that we're also inadvertently doing it for the kids that are the cause of this struggle that we're working so hard to overcome. So.
David or Miriam, did you guys want to have some last words?
Well, I've been thinking, something I can share that I can personally say I've been working on for myself is removing the word busy just for saying I'm busy. Because I think our society, how you call it, glorifies busyness. Like the busier you are, the more you're doing, like, wow, you're so successful, this and this, I'm like, and sometimes it becomes a vicious cycle in a form of identity, a form of like, if I'm busy, that means I'm being productive. That means I'm doing this. And I'm learning to slow down. I'm learning not just, there needs to be space for just to be, like Kelly, like you said, sometimes it's the no, sometimes, or it's the yes to me, to something I need. And it's so hard, as thinking as a parent, this, my kids are a little older now, when they were younger, it just felt like it was nonstop trying to figure out so many things. And again, it could just be seasons too. And that's where we need to have grace for ourselves, right? When our children are a certain age, they need us a different way than when they are a little older. So even, with the people that we work with, the communities we're involved with, just remembering that it's seasons, some seasons are just naturally busier, tougher. We are going through life in different ways. But something I am learning is just removing that word busy, or when people are like, oh, yeah, I know you're busy. I'm like, no, I have time. I can do this. I got 5 minutes for you. It's okay. Because I don't know, I'm learning that we have glorified that word, and it's so harmful sometimes to over busy yourself just to be busy.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And David, you want to have our last words for today?
Last words, boy, there's so much goodness in all of this. I hope everybody's getting a lot out of it. One last thing, and to add just a small nuance to this. And so a new identity that I took on just a couple years ago is now being a grandparent, and greatest role ever. And, one of the interesting things I think about that was, again, talking about it, again, publicly and at work, and people are like, oh, that's great. Your grandparent must be so wonderful. And I do childcare on occasion for them. And I don't necessarily fit it in. I just put it on my calendar when I know that we're fortunate enough to live not too far away and I can do that. And so I put it on my calendar and I talk about it. And again, I think that's just a new phase of life for me. But again, I think there's assumptions that we make about who people are and who our workers are and aren't in some cases. And that, again, it just takes a little bit of, again, showing some courage and talking about it very publicly with people and showing that you value, this role and it's important to who you are, and people will support you. So thank you, everyone.
Well, we thank you all for making time to talk with us today. This was a very, very timely topic. Unfortunately, we really don't have time to take any questions for the chat, but we appreciate all of you guys that hung out with us. If you do have any questions for the chat, Anna Cecilia, if you all want to put your questions in, this group is going to meet again, and we will talk more because we would like to do a part 2 to be able to. There's so much more to talk about as it relates to this, and there's so much more that our communities need to hear about our awareness and our desire to want to improve this space. to create healthier families, healthier children, healthier communities. So again, we thank you all so much for making time for us today. We appreciate the panelists that have taken time out of their schedules to meet with us. We definitely appreciate you and all your expertise and your passion about this project. And we look forward to the next time. So thank you guys, everybody from Smart Start and from LUMO. We appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.